Jesus' first miracle in the Gospel of John is turning water into wine. This is his first miracle. I don't know about you, but if I was Jesus, I'd probably do something a little more spectacular than turning water into wine. I would want Jesus to do something spectacular and amazing that gets really big attention, right? If Jesus was going to do something miraculous, maybe he would do something more than turn water into wine. Maybe he would raise somebody from the dead. That might get some people's attention. Or maybe he would make a woman who couldn't see to be able to see again, right? That might be something spectacular. Or maybe he would cast out demons from a man, right? Or maybe he would make our government work properly. It would all be a miracle. Something spectacular. Right? Instead, Jesus' first miracle is taking water and turning it into a wine so that a party might continue, so that people who have already had too much to drink might have a little bit more. That's Jesus' first miracle. But even if he wanted to do something else, even if Jesus wanted to do something more spectacular, he really didn't have a choice. Because as the scripture says, his mama made him do it. And you know how mamas can be. In Jesus' day, everyone was invited to a wedding. And Jesus and his mother and his disciples were at a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and they were there with most of the town, probably, celebrating this bride and groom getting married. A wedding in Jesus' day would last hours, days, weeks. It would go on forever. It would be a town celebration, and everyone would come to celebrate. And everyone would come to feast and to dance and to drink and to have more food and to celebrate and to drink and to dance and to have more food. It would be an ongoing celebration for a while. So if you were having this party for the whole town and everybody had come to celebrate with you and you ran out of something, it would be a disaster. It's like when I was a grad student in the University of Toronto, my flatmates, roommates, and I decided we were going to have an Easter celebration dinner. We were going to invite our friends over, we were going to cook a meal, we were going to have a celebration dinner at Easter. And right before the meal, we realized we probably didn't have enough silverware for everyone. Well, we certainly weren't going to make people eat with their fingers. But if we didn't have the silverware, it would have been a disaster. Right? We had to share forks or spoons. So we ran out and got some really quickly before we realized the disaster that was going to take place. If you run out of something at a party or something of an event, it could be a disaster. And particularly in Jesus' day, if you're going to run out of something, you run out of wine or food or something, you would become the talk of the town. You know how that is. Those people, they didn't have any food when we went over. We were hungry when we left. We had to stop by Burger King on the way home. Hungry still. Remember that wedding? They had lots of empty wine glasses because not enough wine wasn't served. Remember that wedding? Yeah, we remember. Remember how embarrassing that was? The party ended so soon. That's what people would have said in Jesus' day if they'd run out of something. And so when the last drop of wine is poured, it is a disaster. The families, the bride and the groom, they make sure that the party must last and continue so they won't be ridiculed. But when this last drop of wine is poured and people begin to say, we have no wine, I can imagine the host of the party, the stewards, and the bride and bridegroom are beginning to panic. We've run out of wine. And I can imagine Jesus' mother Mary, she hears this commotion. She hears that they're out of wine. And Mary knows somebody that can take a disastrous situation and turn it into good. And so she makes her way through the party, pushes her way past the guests who are still eating, who have no clue that they've run out of wine yet. And she goes right up to her son Jesus, and she says to him, they're out of wine. And I imagine Mary, she's probably a little short woman, looking up to her tall son, but with more power and authority than anyone else around. looking at Jesus, they're out of wine. She's come to make sure that he does something about it because she knows he can. But Jesus was like, woman, he says to her, what concern is this of me or you? This is not our party. This is not my time. It is not my chance and opportunity to show off. This is not my time yet, Jesus says. It's not for me to do. I'm not going to do it. You can almost see Jesus backing up, like, I don't want to do this. Nope, not going to get involved. Nope, not my time, right? You can just imagine Jesus is protesting his mother's instructions. But I love Mary. She just ignores him completely, like any good mother would do. And she turns to the servants who are standing right beside Jesus, and she says to them, just do what he says, and she walks off. Like, she just walks back to the crowd, leaving Jesus standing there, like, with the servants looking at Jesus, and the disciples looking at each other, and they're looking at Jesus, Jesus looking at them, and they're like, and Mary's just gone back into the crowd, into the party, and her words are still echoing in the air. Just do what he said. Do what he says. It's good advice, really. Do what Jesus would have you do. Do what Jesus says. It's good advice. Back when I was in college, we had this big movement to do just that. To do what Jesus says. You may have remembered this. There were bracelets that you could buy and wear around your wrist that said, WWJD. What would Jesus do? You may have had one. I had one, 2 or 3. It was cool fad, right? Everybody wore them. Every Christian that wanted to be the better Christian wore them because we wanted to do what Jesus told us to do. We wanted to follow that advice that Mary said so long ago. Do what Jesus would have you do. So we wore these bracelets around that said, what would Jesus do? And it would get people in trouble all the time. Like the time when I was having the last donuts at my house and my sister wanted part of it. I was like, no, this is mine. And she goes, what would Jesus do? Or when you wanted to, be angry and hold a grudge and get back at someone, what would Jesus do? Right? That fad didn't last very long. Kind of went away as fast as it came along, right? Because doing what Jesus would have you do is sometimes difficult. It's sometimes hard to do. To do what Jesus would call you to do can sometimes disrupt your life. It can get you in trouble. It can be unpopular. It can be doing something that is strange and odd. I know people in my seminary class who gave up multi-million-dollar salaries to go into ministry, gave up their jobs because they were doing what Jesus called them to do. I know students at Greensboro College who give up their time to volunteer downtown at the IRC, at the Interactive Resource Center, to help homeless people work on getting computer skills and building resumes. They give up their free time for this because they want to do what Jesus is calling them to do. I know people who seek to do what Jesus is calling them to do by going to the prison every weekend and going to the jail to visit those people who are condemned that no one else will go visit or see. Because they're doing what Jesus would call them to do. I know churches that have lost members because they took stands to welcome and love people, to do what Jesus would call them to do. Sometimes it is difficult and unpopular. And it's never so easy. It might actually require sacrifice. It might require courage. It might require us to change our lives forever to do what Jesus would have us do. But if you want to do what Jesus wants you to do, then I do believe that amazing things can happen. If you're willing to be courageous, if you're willing to take a chance, if you're willing to sacrifice, if you're willing to give of your life, if you're willing to lose your life, to do what Jesus would have you do, then I believe amazing things can happen. Like at that wedding, when everybody's standing around looking at Jesus, waiting for him to tell them what to do. He tells the servants not to go find more wine somewhere. Instead, he tells the servants to fill up the jars that are around him with water. That is the oddest thing you could think of. Fill this up with some water. In Jesus' day, water was not something you always drank because it could be difficult. If it wasn't filtered, it might even be dangerous. But he said, fill these up with water. And the servant's like, all right, we'll fill them up. And not only fill up the jars, fill up 6 jars. 6 that are 30 gallons each. That's a lot of water. And you can imagine how much time it took to fill them up. They go and tip up the water, pour the water, keep getting more water, going back and getting more water. They're like, why are you pouring out the water? I don't know, it's what Jesus told us to do. It's crazy. Seems absurd, but we're doing it. And so they fill up all the water, and once all the 6 jars are full of water, 30 gallons of water each, Jesus tells them, now I want you to take some of that water, dip into that water, and take it over to the steward, the chief steward of the wedding, and hand it to the chief steward and tell him to take a drink. Can you imagine that? Really? You want us to get kicked out, don't you? You want us to get ridiculed, don't you? You're going to take some water to the chief steward who's looking for some wine. This is ridiculous. I can imagine the stewards are like, this is absurd. And you know, if you do some absurd things, what Jesus is calling you to do, amazing things can happen. And so they take that pitcher and they take it over to the steward and they give it to him. I can imagine they give it to the chief steward, like, here, Jesus wants you to have this. Right? And I can imagine they're like backing away a little bit because they know that once that steward takes a sip of that water, that it's going to be spit out all over the place, and that steward's going to be mad because he needs wine. So they drink it. He takes a sip, and he says, wow, now that's some good wine. And I can imagine the steward's like, wine? 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 It's wine. It's wine. Yeah, it's wine. Right? yeah, we brought you wine. Yeah. It was overflowing, abundant, everywhere. Wine. And every single jar that they filled with water was wine. And the party was saved. Sometimes doing what Jesus would have you do may seem strange and absurd, but I believe if you do it, amazing things can happen. Water can even turn into wine. And that's Jesus' first miracle. Turning water to wine to save a party. And even though it's not something very spectacular, as other things might be, I do believe it's a sign. A sign of what Jesus has come to do in this world, a sign of what Jesus is trying to show to his people, that Mary knew what Jesus could do and what Jesus was bringing. It was a sign. Because in the prophets of the Old Testament, wine is a sign of God's kingdom in the world. Wine is a sign of God's abundance in the world. Wine is a sign that God has come to change the world. The prophet Amos that we read this morning says that when God redeems and restores the earth, when God redeems and restores God's people, then the mountains shall drip with sweet wine. A day will be like the hills flowing with wine in abundance. The prophet Joel says that in those days when young men shall dream dreams and old women shall see visions, then those days it will be like wine flowing down from the mountaintops, sweet wine flowing down from the hills. When the rabbinic scholars would compare our current day to the day when God would restore God's kingdom and God's earth into a new creation, the rabbinic scholars would say it's like comparing water to wine. Wine is the sign of God's reign and God's kingdom in the world. Wine is a sign that God's kingdom is here. And that in Jesus, in his first miracle, he is ushering into the world his kingdom. That in Jesus, God's kingdom has come. And that it is coming in wine and abundance, overflowing, always and everywhere. The wine is here. I know sometimes it's hard to believe that God's kingdom has arrived. It is sometimes hard to believe that God's kingdom of justice and mercy is in this place. It is sometimes hard to see that the wine is here, especially when everything around us seems to fall apart every single day. when violence and gunshots seem to ring out in our cities, when bombs are exploding in places of the Philippines and churches and people are killed, when our government and our democracy can hardly function because politics is more about hate than it is about love, when our earth seems to be warming so fast that it is freezing us all, when terrorism still seems to reign in our news, when peace seems like a far dream, it's hard to believe that the kingdom of God is here. It's hard to believe that the wine is here, abundant and overflowing, always and everywhere. It's hard to see. I believe that's the way God's miracles work, though. I believe that's the way God's kingdom works, too. It's hard to see. But it's here. Overflowing in abundance. Everywhere. It's here. I believe it's here. Even though I may not see it all the time. You know, everybody in that wedding, they had no idea that the water had turned to wine. Most everyone at the wedding had no idea when the miracle happened. Nobody saw it. Nobody knew it. The servants had a clue. They knew where the wine came from. The disciples might have had a clue. They might have known where the wine came from, but nobody else. The host was like, "Hey, you brought out the best wine for everybody to drink now. This is amazing. You did something amazing. This is wine. It's coming." Nobody knew that Jesus had done and performed this miracle right under their noses. They didn't even see it. They didn't even notice it. Well, maybe Mary noticed. I'm sure she knew. She knew where the wine came from. But most people didn't. Most people didn't see that the glory of God had been revealed right under their noses. But I think that's what the kingdom of God is like. It is always underneath us and around us in small ways that we may not even notice or see. Because the kingdom of God is not flashy or get big attention or does something miraculous or great. It is this subtle movement of God's Holy Spirit in the world that brings justice and love and peace and will not be stopped no matter what news or bad news we see in this world. The miraculous sign of God's justice and mercy and peace is all around us everywhere, in the most ordinary places, in the most ordinary ways. Back in 2003, you might remember this movie. There was a movie called Bruce Almighty. Do you remember this movie, Bruce Almighty? You should see it if you haven't seen it. It's a great movie. Morgan Freeman plays God, of course. Morgan Freeman would play God. But this guy named Bruce is given the power of God. So he's Bruce Almighty. And when he finally gets this power, he starts to do some funny and silly things because he has the power of God to do whatever he wants. So we sit in a restaurant one scene, and he has a bowl of tomato soup in front of him. And Bruce Almighty's like, "Oh, watch this, I'm going to do something miraculous and amazing." So he begins to hold up his hands, and there's a wind that starts blowing around. The restaurant door opens, there's napkins flying everywhere, and all of a sudden, the tomato soup right in front of him begins to split right down the middle. He's very proud of himself. It's the parting of the red soup, right? Well, eventually, a little bit later in the movie, God's not very happy with Bruce. So God pulls Bruce aside. He's like, this is not how God works. And he says, "You know that thing you did with the soup? That parting of the red soup? That's not a miracle. That's a magic trick," he says. "That's just a trick." He says, "Bruce, a miracle is that a mother who is single and has 2 kids, she still gets them to soccer practice in the evening and works 2 jobs while doing it. That's a miracle. A miracle is when a kid says yes to an education and no to drugs. That's a miracle. Miracles happen around us everywhere and always, all the time. People are always looking up for something miraculous to happen. When the miracles are always happening around us everywhere, already here. When we seek out to love our enemies instead of hating them, that's a miracle. When we see people for the content of their character and not the color of their skin, that's a miracle. When we begin to care enough for other people that will inconvenience our lives enough to make a difference in somebody else's life, then that's a miracle. When we're willing to open our doors to the community around us and to be a church of this community, then that's a miracle. When we begin to love and serve others in this world without asking anything for return, that's a miracle. When we believe that God's kingdom and justice has come, no matter what, that's a miracle. The miracle of God's kingdom is already here. It's like sweet wine, overflowing in abundance, always and everywhere. When I was in college, my campus minister would always make us uncomfortable by taking us to places we did not want to go and doing things we did not want to do. We would go hang out in a jail for an afternoon. We would go serve in a soup kitchen sometimes. One time we went on a trip to Asheville to a homeless shelter and we stayed there. And we learned from the people who were there. I'll never forget, I'll always remember this couple that was there, a man and a woman. They were married, living at the shelter for that time being, experiencing some homelessness in their life. And then we shared our stories together, and I remember she saying to us, "We don't have much," she said, "but we do have each other. And sometimes that's enough." After we had been together for a while, we decided that before we left, we needed to have worship. And then we should have communion. But we didn't have communion. We weren't prepared. We had no bread. We had no juice. We had no wine. So our campus minister, she went into the kitchen, plundering through what she could find. She brought out some loaf bread, there's a slice of loaf bread right there. And she brought out a pitcher of water, and she gave us little cups. You know those little bathroom cups you get with Disney characters or something? That's what she gave us. She poured all the little cups of water, and we had some piece of a loaf bread. And we had communion right there together. I know it's just bread and water. I know it's just ordinary loaf bread and a little cup of water. But for some reason, it tasted a little bit like wine. Overflowing in abundance. Always.